Hey, what's up, guys? Wanted to share with you kind of something that I had learned this morning, and it's something that really hit home deep with me, and I hope this helps you. And it kind of goes along with, the reason why we procrastinate, why we put off things, why we don't get what we want out of life. Um, Pretty crazy stuff, but it's very powerful, and I can see the impact that it's had on my life. So just a little bit about me, like I've been a chronic procrastinator my whole life. Like I always put things off till the last minute. um, and I never understood why until I learned this concept today, and it kind of finally clicked. And so I want to share with you what I learned. um, if you've never looked into dopamine, the chemical dopamine that we all produce, and how it works and what triggers it, you should definitely look at that. There's actually a video, I'll post a link to the video here in the description. Go watch that video. It's very, very mind boggling. And at least for me, I learned a lot. And I feel like I've heard it before, but for today, for some reason, it just clicked today. So dopamine is that chemical that our brain produces, that is kind of like the pleasure response in our brain. Okay, so when something cool happens, we get a hit of dopamine. And in fact, dopamine can be triggered with anything, really, anything that we do. But it's triggered very strongly when we do certain things or when we see certain things. And the problem is, when we have easy access to dopamine triggers, we develop a tolerance. And in order to get that same level of pleasure, we have to have more of that. Common example is drug use, right? Drug addict, they take a hit of heroin, but then as time goes on, their tolerance rises. They have to have more and more and more until eventually they may end up dead or whatever. But there are so many things that trigger this dopamine response, such as social media, receiving a text message, receiving an email, hearing that ding on your phone. That notification can trigger a dopamine response. TV, social media, certain foods trigger a dopamine response. And this is very important to understand, because what ends up happening is, as we engage in these easy dopamine triggers and our tolerance rises, our interest in other things that don't produce a strong dopamine response, our interest goes down. And this causes procrastination, putting things off, not doing those things that are actually going to make an impact in our life. And so for me, I can see this in my life. In high school, it was video games for me. I would play video games and I'd put off my homework until the very last minute. Today in my life, it's email. I constantly check my email, and it messes up my life. And so it's important to recognize these things and understand that these dopamine triggers are basically controlling your life. They control all of us to a point. I think we all have some sort of addiction in our life that causes a dopamine response. And what ends up happening is we get more and more tolerant to the trigger, and so then we need more and more to satisfy that urge. And so what ends up happening is we end up doing things that don't get us what we want in life, and our interest in those things that will get us what we want continues to go down and plummet, and we just end up not doing those things. And it's this vicious cycle, like just vicious. And what's crazy too is, these apps on our phones, social media, Facebook, YouTube, they are developed to trigger a dopamine response in your brain and to keep you on their platform for as long as possible. But here's the thing is, the more time we spend on these triggers, the less time we're spending on things that matter. And that's the thing that clicked today for me, is how much farther along would I be in life if I didn't spend so much time engaging in these dopamine triggers. And that's kind of a sobering thought, you know? It's like, man, where would I be financially? Where would I be in my health? And so the phrase comes to mind, self-imposed prison. I think we all have a self-imposed prison. Maybe your self-imposed prison is your body, because after years of indulging in maybe, foods that feel good, that make you feel good in the short term, you're now suffering the consequences of that. Or maybe, and again, it's that tolerance, right? Maybe you started off with a can of Coke a day, and now just to get through the day, you need 32 ounces or 64 ounces because your tolerance has risen so high. But what is the cumulative effect of that addiction had on your health? How has your body suffered because of that? There's so many of these things. The time you spend on social media or checking your email, how much time are you spending on a daily basis, and what is the cumulative effect of that time on your personal finances? Because that's time spent indulging in these triggers is time not spent doing things that make an impact, such as building a business, for example, or studying, learning something new, learning a new tactic, how to market, how to build a business, or how to improve your relationship. And so how has your life been affected by these dopamine triggers, by engaging in these things? How have your relationships been affected? When you're sitting around the dinner table, is everyone on their phone? And so it's kind of mind-blowing that we have all of these distractions, all of these dopamine triggers that steal one of the most precious resources that we have, and that is time. I would dare say that time is more valuable than money, because there is an unlimited amount of money in the world. Governments just print it. There is not an unlimited amount of time. We all have a limited amount of time in this life, and we don't actually know how much time we each get. And so what are you doing with that time? And how much of that time is being taken to indulge and to satisfy that desire for just a simple dopamine hit? And what kind of prison have you erected in your life to satisfy that dopamine urge? It's crazy stuff. Hopefully I'm making sense. It'll make sense if you watch that video I posted below, but just remember this, guys. Like I've made some headway in my life, I just look back at, 4 years ago, 2016, when I was working as a corrections officer, making less than $50K a year, working 12-hour graveyard shifts. And then, fast forward to today, to be able to have a 6-figure business, change my life, right? And no longer have to work, those 12-hour graveyard shifts. And one thing I can say is, without being completely aware of it, I have been able to limit some of these things to a certain extent. And that, I think, has made a huge difference in the progress that I've been able to make. And I think it could help you as well make progress in your life. If you walk through my house today, you will not find a TV. We just don't own one. Does that mean we don't watch Netflix? No, we do watch Netflix. We have a laptop where we watch Netflix every once in a while, but we don't own a TV. And And so ultimately, what we get out of life is based on the decisions that we make and how we use our time on a daily basis. You know, when I was at the prison, after 10 p.m., all you have to do are your counts every hour. There's not much other work that needs to be done. And so the default was most officers will go and hit up YouTube, right? Check out the videos, see what's going on, scroll the internet. And I did that. Like, I'm not going to say that I didn't, but I also took that time to read and to study on things that, you know, study on potential businesses that I could start that would allow me no longer to work at the prison. And I just think, had I not made that decision, what if I had just gone with the crowd and just watched Netflix like everyone else? I would still be working there. And so I just hope that you can, one, become aware of your self-imposed prisons and your addictions, because we all have them. We're all addicted to something. What's your addiction? What do you use to trigger that dopamine response on a daily basis? Become aware of that, and then develop a plan to limit those triggers or potentially eliminate them. Because here's what we ultimately have to do is we have to get to a point where we no longer need those things, and the hard work, the difficult tasks that we're avoiding eventually become the dopamine trigger that we need. Because everything can trigger a dopamine response. Exercise will trigger a dopamine response. However, drinking a can of Coke will produce a stronger response. And so, but if you can eliminate the Coke, you know, to a certain point so that the dopamine that you get from exercising is all you need, then you're going to reap the rewards of that, right? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. At the end of the day, I think we're just not aware of these things. Awareness is key. And here's another thing to consider. You may be thinking, well, those things make me happy. They do produce pleasure, no doubt. But what is the long-term effect of continuing to participate in these things? Look long-term. You know, how does engaging in social media on a nightly basis affect your relationships? How does drinking that soda every day affect your health in the long term? How does, you know, constantly checking email or watching Netflix instead of building a business affect your bank account in the long term? Consider these things, because at the end of the day, life is hard no matter what. My wife sent me this thing. I can't remember exactly what it says, but life is hard if you're broke and in debt, but it's also hard if you're financially disciplined and you strive to save. It's hard both ways, but which hard would you rather have? Would you rather have the hard of not knowing if you'll pay your bills every month? Or would you rather have the hard of, you know, worrying about how much taxes you're going to pay? Life is hard if you're sick and overweight. And life is hard if you go to the gym and work your ass off every day. The workout is hard. Being obese is hard. They're both hard. Which hard do you want? It's hard being married. It's hard being divorced. You know, it's hard working for the man. It's hard having your own business. Which hard do you want? So we just have to, but that's the beautiful thing about life, is we get to choose. we can choose which hard we want. So anyway, that's just something that I wanted to share with you guys, is identify these triggers, these habits, these addictions, and then work on changing them. One thing that I've done is I've completely deleted social media from my cell phone. As far as like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I don't have those apps. The addiction is strong though, and usually 2 days go by and I end up downloading them again. So it's a work in progress. It's something that I'm working on. But I think if you can work and just be aware of those things that are robbing your time, and you become aware of them, and then you can replace them with other things or just eliminate them completely, you'll find that in so doing, you're going to take a more of an interest in doing those things that you're trying to avoid. You're going to take more of an interest in doing that hard work that's necessary to get what it is that you want. And that ultimately is going to bring you greater peace, fulfillment, and happiness at the end of the day, is doing those things that you're avoiding. But if you can eliminate the distractions and these high dopamine triggering actions, those things that you're trying to avoid will become easier to do. So consider that. I hope that helps you guys. It's definitely helped me, and it helps me. I'm not perfect. I still, don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not advocating that you need to abstain from everything that triggers a dopamine response. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is be aware of where your time is going and make changes if necessary, especially if there are things that you want in life that you don't have. Just ask the simple question: is what I'm doing going to get me what I want today? If you want a six-pack, then are you going to eat that cake today? If you want to be financially free, then are you going to continue to work in a job that pays you $15 an hour? Or are you going to take time to find a business or a side hustle that's going to replace that income? That question is ultimately what led me to break free out of a job that I didn't want. Is I recognized that if I stayed in that job, it would not give me what I wanted. Even if I retired, it would not give me what I wanted. And so I didn't have a choice. I mean, I had a choice. I could either stay knowing that if I stayed on that path, I wouldn't get where I wanted to go, or I had to find a new path. And so that's what I did. And so you have to ultimately ask that same question of yourself in all areas of your life. Are the actions you're taking today going to get you where you want to go? In your health, in your relationships, in your finances, in whatever it is. So, all right, guys, that's all I have for you.